The People's Progressive Party offered to the Guyana Teachers Union of 10% increase on teachers' salary is ridiculous, disrespectful, vindictive, and a reflection of the disdain that the regime has for teachers and other public officials. It must be recalled that both Barra Jagdeo and Irfan Ali demanded that the APNU AFC government pay teachers 50%. They made this demand under the then government before the discovery of oil, claiming that the then government can afford it. Now, when there is oil, the said government is contending that they cannot afford to pay teachers 50% increase. This is the level of hypocrisy, disdain, vindictiveness, and trickery that Barra Jagdeo and Irfan Ali are meting out to the hardworking teachers of this nation. When one notes that the so-called package delivers little or nothing to teachers and is a mere smoke screen for concealing the fact that the government is unprepared to treat teachers fairly. When it is recognized that the infrastructure budget is 666 billion and it is 666 billion and the main fund for PPP corruption, then it is obvious that the PPP is deliberately impoverishing our teachers and have no interest in improving the quality of their lives. The mere reduction in corruption and waste in infrastructure projects can release at least 50 billion, which can give more than a 35% increase. Just to give more than a 35 increase, easily finding the money to pay it. The PNCR/APNU is guaranteeing all public service workers that they will receive a 35% increase in wages and salaries under us as the next government. PPP discrimination is obvious. A recent visit to the east coast of Demerara, where work is being done on the 4-lane road on the line top, reveals a sad tale of discrimination. Originally, the government contended that the road was going to be 40 feet from the center. As the work progressed, East Coast residents recognized that the construction was not occurring 40 feet from the center all along the road. The residents took it on themselves to do the measurements and recognized that in places like LBI and Montrose, PPP Stronghold, the measurement is 20 feet from the center. Consequently, residents complain that in places like Plaisance, they are asking residents to move to accommodate 40 feet from the center. But in order to not have to move people in PPP strongholds, they have reduced the road width from 40 feet from center to 20 feet. Residents are contending that this is a clear case of PPP discrimination against African Guyanese villages.
Thank you very much, Nika. PPP trying to hide the fact that high unemployment exists in Guyana. Vice President Jagdeo's recent acknowledgement that his government does not calculate unemployment figures, but rather makes policy decisions based on guesswork, is disturbing but not surprising. For him to say at his last press conference that, quote unquote, everybody knows there are labor shortages, and so unemployment is a non-issue, is utter garbage and the PPP's version of economic analysis and planning. In fact, it is not even economics anymore. Under the PPP, the Bureau of Statistics has not conducted its quarterly national labor force survey since November 2021, a total of 11 missing surveys. As we informed the IMF last year, the stoppage of these surveys did not occur by chance, but with the condonation, if not at the behest, of the current PPP regime. The secrecy has, however, failed to hide Jagdeo's incompetence and cluelessness, and the fact that they have no basis for many of the pronouncements they are making about the economy. Let us explain to the Guyanese people a few aspects of the unemployment situation. Proper management of the economy requires the government to measure and track, at minimum, 1, the size of the working age population, 2, the labor force participation rate. Many adults may not join the labor market, but choose to be stay-at-home parents, for example. 3, underemployment and unemployment. 4, employment by economic sector. 5, seasonal variations in employment, Christmas season, harvesting periods, etc. And 6, evidence of structural unemployment where, for example, available workers do not have the required skills or where they are unable or unwilling to relocate or commute long distances to work. A proper labor force survey would also break down its numbers by gender, age, education level, and communities, and therefore allow for proper planning. The PUP has no interest in that. Even without direct and systematic labor surveys, a sensible and serious government can examine proxy or indirect signs to approximately assess the situation. However, the signs paint a bleak picture. For one, number of part-time workers keeps increasing when in Jagbio's quote-unquote everybody knows scenario. The number ought to be declining. The government even budgeted more money to pay these workers in 2024. One would have expected that by now they would have found full-time jobs after training or job seeking. Similarly, many Guyanese lack the requisite training to meet the demand for the oil and gas, transportation, construction, healthcare, and education sectors, among others. Secondly, a good proxy measure of a labor shortage is the upward pressure it puts on wages in the private sector, resulting in the movement of low-wage public sector workers towards the private sector. We see little evidence of that. Thirdly, we see no evidence of able-bodied pensioners returning to the workforce en masse. Fourthly, in every community across Guyana, the presence of unemployed youths and adults is plain to see in the various villages at congregation spots. Moreover, this year's CSEC results, with a math pass rate of 31%, which is even lower than last year's 32% pass rate, highlights the reality that 80% of Guyanese do not hold math and English passes at CSEC. What this means is that they don't have the basic requirements to obtain employment or pursue further studies. These students are locked out of many formal jobs, which is a critical contributor to the structural unemployment and underemployment we see today. Rather than focus the GOLD program on the oil and gas and various potentially promising industries, the PUP has declared that it is seeking 100,000 foreign workers to fill skill gaps. Should there not instead be a focus on assessing skill gaps and growth opportunities, and on training local Guyanese to fill these opportunities? Mass importation should only be an option once these mechanisms have been exhausted. Against this background, as the next government, we will, 1, restart the quarterly labor force survey while ensuring the Bureau of Statistics is adequately staffed and equipped. 2, invest heavily in programs aimed at skilling, upskilling, and reskilling Guyanese. 3, increase the labor force participation rate of women by expanding the network of daycare centers nationwide. 4, expand the workforce in the public sector to manage our comprehensive social protection system and our data-driven approach to managing government. 5, establish an effective employment information network so that job seekers and job providers can easily connect. 6, double the investment in the small business sector to increase self-employment. Additionally, for larger business investments, we will provide credit through a productivity-focused development bank so that high-income jobs can be generated. Also, we will match this with tax incentives to encourage the adoption of technology so that local businesses can scale effectively, providing more and higher-paying jobs in the process. We will say more on these and other ideas in the coming period. The PUP must be the only government in the world that does not plan and does not care to, and is proud to publicly admit it. Recall President Ali's interview in January 2024 to the World Political Review, when he declared we don't have the time to plan. In virtually no democracy worldwide would a country's citizens accept literal guesswork in place of informed policymaking. Come 2025 or sooner, Guyanese must reject this disrespect at the ballot box.
Thank you. At this time, I will take questions on the presentation. Mr. Adam Hyde.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
Morning.
The Comrade Leader, you talked about the teacher problem and the disrespect shown. Sir, would you consider the Guyana Teachers Union itself being disrespectful first of all, foisting an agreement like that on the teachers by way of subterfuge.
From the outside, it does appear that there was not a consensus and that they didn't engage the teachers. So I wouldn't say the Guyana Teachers Union. I would say some elements in the Guyana Teachers Union.
And then you take the call by the PPP to pay the teachers 50% when there wasn't oil in the economy. And now they pay the teachers 10%. Well, we have said that there is no planning on the part of the PPP. But was there a calculation done that the PPP had shown the then government why it should pay 50%?
No, it was the usual rant by Barry Jack Deo, and I think Ifan Ali himself did rant about paying 50%. My understanding is that there are about 14,000 teachers, and that $50 billion can more than pay them the money that they want. Like I said in the press statement, here is it, you have $666 billion for infrastructure. Like I said, right out here, you don't have to go far. Right out here, you see a road that is useless. You know it's money for the friends. Then you go to the side of the secondary school, you see wastage. All across the country you go, you see they do a road today and tomorrow. Just drive down this new highway and you will see it begin to deteriorate. So what we're saying essentially is that, look, the country doesn't have the capacity to do the level of infrastructure work. We believe infrastructure work is needed. But what we see is the government using it as a slush fund, a corruption fund. And we're saying that their priorities are wrong. You need to prioritize improving the quality of life of the people of Guyana by paying them proper salaries. And we're saying as well that just the saving from corruption and cutting waste will give you far more money than is needed to pay the teachers and to pay the public service generally. And we have made a commitment that we will pay no less than 35% to all workers in this country in the public sector, not only teachers, because it is needed to give them a livable income and we can afford it. But the government is hell-bent on infrastructure that allows them to become involved in corrupt transaction and get rich. You've seen people who had no money at the beginning of this term now building posh apartments for 100 million and more than that. People breaking down a proper building to rebuild in Alberton. So the evidence is clear that the sole purpose is to use corruption to enrich the PPP elite, their family, their friends, and their favorites.
And Adam, really one of the things that we want to highlight here, and something that we of course mentioned in our statement, is, to me, it is absolutely shocking that the government would be spending this kind of money between last year and this year. You're looking at 10 years worth of budgets. And look at pass rates in something as critical as mathematics at CSEC, 32%, 31%, the vast majority of students not passing. And then, of course, many students have dropped out. You would think that there would be a surge in funding in education, a surge in funding for teachers to deal with such a critical issue. Therefore, we must conclude the government is perfectly comfortable having the vast majority of Guyanese not pass this exam. And if you look at pre-2014, that is exactly the case. You saw very similar numbers. Of course, our numbers were better by 10%, even without such a large budget. So really what is happening is that the government is going out of its way to facilitate really such a difficult situation. And of course, that raises the question, if it is that there's such a desperate need for further investment in the education sector, why in the world you would refuse to pay teachers more money? There's clearly a need to support our educators, and the government is refusing to support them. So I guess next year we'll see, I don't know, 30% pass rate in math.
But you also have got to recognize that the government seems to feel buildings are what constitute education. Every time they go to the parliament or they speak, they talk about how many schools they are building, etc. But schools in themselves cannot deliver quality education. It is the human resource that is critical, the teachers, the support staff, and the government is depriving them of resources. So the very approach of the government suggests that they have no interest in improving the quality of education. Their interest is in using the education system to build buildings so that the cronies can get contracts, and they don't care what happens. And then you hear it in them. I don't remember if it's the president or the vice president, but one of the two of them even suggested that they're considering giving the money to the private sector. Once they do that, the private schools, once they do that, right away, they will further disenfranchise poor people children, because there's no guarantee that they will get a proper education. And so the entire focus of the government is bizarre. It is not focused on improving the quality of education and the quality of life of the teachers and providing the resources that are necessary in the school system. They are not even reviewing the curriculum. Anybody who's serious about education would know what ends up coming out of the secondary school is origin is in the primary school. And therefore, if you do not reform the primary school, ensure it is focused, ensure that by the time children would have left primary school across the board, they can read, write, reason, comprehend the basics, then we are in deep trouble, because you're going to create the base in secondary school. You come from primary school either having the base or you don't. And if you don't rectify the problems at the level of the primary school, then we're in deep trouble.
Questions on the first statement?
Yes, if not, the question will continue.
Go ahead.
You said that the government seems bent on empowering the teachers. Mr. Lowe spoke about the declining pass rates. Is there a plot to make Guyana become a nation of idiots? And if so, for what purpose?
To the extent that you are led by idiots, they would want idiots below. So it wouldn't surprise me. You do not get from the leadership or the government in this country that they are serious about improving their education. In fact, everything they do suggests that they don't want to. And so I am of the view, how is it you could rationalize not giving teachers a livable wage at a time when you have oil money, at the time when the education system is declining? How could you rationalize giving teachers 10%? And at the same time, they come with this inflationary, stupid argument. When they put far more money in the hands of their cronies out of that 666 billion we are talking about, like I said, their priorities are misplaced. They are interested in putting money, making money available for corruption. They are interested in making money available so that they could get rich and they can put down all these apartments and hotels, at the end of which, at the end of the oil boom, I don't know what they will do with them. But like we have said consistently, it makes sense to invest in human resource. Let us not forget, and apart from teachers, let us not forget the PPP was given money by the EU to train and retrain sugar workers. They never did. They wasted the money. And then they left the sugar industry in the present state it is. They are bringing people to manage it who are incompetent, so they'll keep changing them. And that again is an indication, even with their own support base, they are not interested in improving the quality of life. They're interested, like they did with the EU money, for it to get into the hands of the friend, family, and favorite. So you end up with a skeldon, which they done before it even opened. And that's the nature of the government.
And the other one of the things that is so really again troubling is, on the one hand, you're not seeing an investment in human capital, and on the other hand, these people talking about bringing in 100,000 people from who knows where. So it seems to be a deliberate plan by the government not to educate, not to skill Guyanese so that they can get these resources, so that they can get good jobs, but rather to bring in people to replace them. That is extremely concerning. Now, of course, we want there to be skilled labor in the economy. We're going to build our local skilled labor, and there may be experts that need to be brought in and so on to fill some gaps. But 100,000 people, when you are not even investing in your own people's education, when the education system is actually performing worse than before, is to me extremely, extremely concerning. And so I wouldn't say that they want a nation of idiots, as you're saying. But I'm saying that it looks like, as time goes on, they're deliberately not giving Guyanese the tools to succeed in this economy.
All right.
All right, one more.
Oh.
You talked about the East Coast Road construction, the railway embankment, and the measurement would have been from the center of the road. So you make it the distinction that this measurement is changing as the road proceeds to certain areas. A contractor or whatever who build roads would have had a consistent measurement. How is it, sir, that you've been able to find out that the measurements have changed from community to community?
In the first place, as they were remember, Barra Jagdeo went to Plaisance to tell people they got to move. And he said he had given them 6 months to move. That has passed. But what we saw, apart from Plaisance, in the way of the road, once it was 40 by 40, you would have had to move a lot of structures right in Montrose, in other areas. But then I observe when you're going up the road, you see to the bottom by Plaisance, and so it's wide, and they're widening, they even full in trench. But as you get past those into certain areas, it gets narrow. And the truth is, in the first place, I paid no mind. And then some residents came to me pointing out that they had measured it and that the areas, Plaisance, etc., is 40 from the center. Whenever they meet a PPP stronghold, it's 20 from the center. And they point out that when they meet Nabakalis and them going down, Nabakalis, Golden Grove, they're going back to 40, which means they got to move the people. And that to me is ominous. And I would like to see them explain why they are changing from 40 feet from center to 20 feet from center and then going back to 40 feet, and what rationale they are using for where going to be narrow and where going to be wide. And then what sense it make from the standpoint of traffic control and common sense. It makes no sense, but when you travel the East Coast, that is what you're seeing. And the people on the East Coast asked me to highlight it, and let's get a response from the government of why this dual approach to the road.
I'll open the floor now for any other question.
No other question? Mr. No.
Hold on one sec. I think I'm hearing Ms. Garnett.
Hi, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Tamika Garnett, Times. I want to stir up from your statement just a little bit to ask a question. Yesterday, the Vice President spoke about his government's rationale behind giving the indigenous communities 50% of the carbon credit funds earned under the low carbon development strategy. He challenged that the low carbon development strategy as something superior to the green state development strategy that the ACNU had during their tenure in office. I just wondered if Mr. Norton can touch on, from what he remembered, what were some of the biggest achievements of the green state development strategy? Can he speak on if the ACNU is to go back into government, will he be looking to keep the low carbon development strategy? Will he be looking to replace it? If he is looking to replace it, what are the plans, if any, of how he will go about the framework for replacing it? And what are some of the plans to monetize the way, whatever plan it is to monetize the things the way the low carbon development strategy has been doing?
First, let me say this to you. I think the premise in which you started your question is totally in contradiction to the end. But let's deal with the premise. Nobody is saying no to the low carbon development strategy. I have always argued that the major problems I saw with the low carbon development strategy, it was primarily transactionalist, one. Two, it focused a lot on ensuring money for a number of things. Before I go to the second part, let me deal with the first part. The issue with the low carbon, with the allocations to the indigenous community, is that it should have been done in consultation with the indigenous people, and that the government is out of place to want to determine for them when they are the main custodian of the forest. It's the first thing. Now, sometimes the PPP tend to start environmental history at them. Let me put this clear. In 1989, Desmond Hoyt put before the Commonwealth what was then called the Commonwealth Rainforest, Guyana Commonwealth Rainforest Project, which became the Iwakurama Project, which meant that since then we had established that, one, we recognize the importance of the forest, and that, two, Iwakurama was established to be able to study it and to then work out the benefits to be had. This occurred between 1989 and 1992 when we were in government. The PPP came to government and went purely down the road of a transactionalist approach. Now, when David Granger came, he sought to develop a complete strategy that has some resemblance to the low carbon development strategy, but went way past the low carbon development strategy to create a green economy, so that with the coming of oil, etc., yes, you will pursue oil, but you had a complete strategy for the greening of Guyana. Now, I think it is unwise, for the want of a better word, to ask what did the green paper, or no, sorry, the Green State Development Strategy achieve, when it is well known that the document was completed to the end of our term, and it wasn't a case of it being implemented for a number of years, so the benefit would have derived. But what it did was to ensure that you had a comprehensive approach to this question of the environment. And the question as to what we will do moving forward, we will embrace the green strategy, but times would have changed, which means we will have to revisit it. And in revisiting it, we will then determine what elements we move forward with, what new ones we put. Now, even when I was a parliamentarian, when the low carbon development strategy was coming, I had argued then, and this is in the parliamentary records, that it should not be restricted to just making money on the standing forests. But I had pointed out then that there's a biodiversity convention in which there are many elements in that biodiversity convention that, if implemented, can redound to the benefit of the people of Guyana. And so my problem with the low carbon development strategy is that it is reflective of Jack Dale, a man who is focused on getting as much money as he could get out of a process that didn't necessarily will go to the indigenous people in the way that it should have gone. And so, in short, there are elements of the low carbon development strategy that are useful and can be continued, but it has to be widened to ensure that there is a national green strategy.
One of the things that we also want to point out, one of the most, I would say, disturbing or alarming remarks came from President Ali when he was asked by Al Jazeera, now that Guyana has found significant oil resources, how are you going to change things? Are you looking forward to this? And he said all it means is that we're going to do the same things we were doing before, but faster. Now, that reflected really what I think is coming from Jaguar here, which is that the PDP's thinking has not evolved beyond the low carbon development strategy and has not recognized that there is much more that needs to be done in order for Guyana to deal with its new challenges and its new opportunities. So in terms of what we will do going forward, we've spoken at length about a people-centered development strategy. We've spoken at length about the need to eliminate poverty swiftly, about the need to invest in human capital, training, and just as we were speaking about earlier. We've spoken at length about the need to develop Guyana's non-oil economy through financing and through tax measures, through improving productivity. According to the IDB, Guyana consistently has had some of the lowest levels of technological adoption and therefore low levels of productivity, and as a result, of course, low wages. We speak about these things because we recognize that so much has changed that we have to now address these challenges. It would be ridiculous for us to measure ourselves by all of the same metrics that we were looking at before, when we've got every single month nearly 300 million US coming in, a number which would have been a shocking amount before. It's as much as the entire Skeldon project when you add up the various components over time. And so we have, of course, put forward, therefore, plans that take into account the change and that really ensure that Guyanese will have a better standard of living in the shortest possible time. To me, it is tragic to hear the president and to hear Jaguar kind of go down this line, but all they're doing is running the same playbook that they had before. They're bereft of ideas. And even worse, they're not willing to ask people for ideas. Rather, they want to stay in their own little circle.
I also wish to point out, I thought when the interviewer from Hard Talk interviewed us, when I saw what President Ali said and he was going to lecture him, I thought it was a missed opportunity. Here you had an opportunity to say, one, yes, we are an oil producing country. and that he should have articulated the need for the developed world to give us environmental space to be able to develop the oil and gas sector, but also add that we are committed to sustainable development and that we will use that type of a green development strategy to ensure that even though we utilize the oil resources, we were contributing minimally to environmental degradation and at the same time trying to develop environmental profit, for the want of a rather word, rather than a deficit. But the opportunity was taken to be arrogant rather than to articulate a clear environmental policy. And that is one of the problems that come when you have just something like the low carbon development strategy. It is focused on forests, but it isn't focused on the wider environment. So you do not have a broad environmental strategy. It's just like you keep saying that there is climate change, but virtually everything the government is conceptualizing, they are focusing on the low-lying coast and not developing a strategy to begin to shift Guyana to highlands. And the only time they are going to shift people to highlands is probably when the sea would have taken over the entire coast. I recall Robeson-Ben coming to the parliament and saying, you don't have to worry with that. It can take a long time before it takes over the coast, rather than a more sensible approach which says we recognize it, and in our planning into the future, we will take the environment into consideration and develop plans and strategies for the highland. And I think the government, one of the weaknesses of the government focus on the low carbon development strategy is that it fails to take into consideration the other wider issues of the environment. Something as basic as solid waste management is not being handled properly by this government.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Mr. Harris.
Mr.
All right, I'll take the two follow-up and then I'll go to Mr. Harris.
Martin pointed out that the Green State Development Strategy wasn't out until the ending of the APNU's term in government. So can you say when the APNU scrapped the LCDS during that 5 years, what did APNU have in place and what did they accomplish if the Green State wasn't done until the end? What was done?
Let me say this to
Have
you.
they something in place and in implementing initiatives?
Let me say this to you.
What achieved?
Let me say this to you. I don't know that the APNU scrapped the low carbon development strategy. They reviewed it and they made changes. Having reviewed it and made changes, from the time we came into government, we did indicate very early that we were moving in the direction of the Green State Development Strategy. Now, unlike the PPP, these things demand proper studies. It's the same reason they got problem with the lands for the gas to shore, because they do no proper studies. They don't take their time. Every project they put out, Skeldon was to solve all the energy problems. It would have taken all the sugar. No proper studies, that was a flop. Fiber optic cable, the same thing. As young journalists, you should recognize that a government rolling out things from the head of the president and the vice president, that doesn't make sense. You need proper feasibility study. You need proper plans and programs. And so I would say to you, I repeat, we didn't scrap it. We look at the negative elements, remove them, and we develop on what had. We recognize at the end of it that low carbon development strategy was not and cannot be the solution. And we ended up looking at a wider program. Even before David Granger went into government, he was signaling we were going in that direction. But you can have a general vision, but when you get government and the reality is there, you have to deal with it based on the reality. And I keep making this point regularly to journalists. It is one thing, like Jagdeo shout out in opposition, oh, pay them 50%. And now, apparently, I know which figures he's seeing. You can't pay 50%. If you are reckless in opposition, you're going to run into problems in government. And I'm saying to you, we reviewed it, we saw the negatives, we developed a broad strategy that was more holistic, but it came virtually to the end of the term. And once in government, we will review it with the aim of implementing a proper strategy for environmental development.
One of the things we also want to ensure doesn't happen here is the PPP, I think, is attempting to rewrite history here, man. What we saw under the David Granger administration was significant focus on an improvement in human capital acquisition, in building our human capital stock. We saw, as I pointed out earlier, a sharp increase, like a 30% increase in the pass rates in mathematics, a critical area, and we saw that for multiple years. We also saw that public servants received much more pay, which of course helps with their worker enthusiasm. We also saw public servants receive training, extensive training. We saw the police receive training. We saw GRA receive training. We also saw that the Bertram Collins College for the Public Service, which was again an institution intended to provide for training to increase our human capital stock, was put in place. And that institution served many people. I even remember giving a lecture there on anti-corruption issues during that period of time. And of course, that meant that there was a focus now on cutting out corruption in the public service so we can have better and better performance of the public service. And so to say that I think what the people is trying to say is that there's no accomplishments and nothing was done is a rewriting of history. There were significant accomplishments. We saw a lot done when it comes to human capital acquisition, which is a major focus. And of course, economics papers would indicate that human capital focus is one of the key determinants of development, and also building your institutions, cutting out corruption and so on. It's another key determinant of development. I can point you to papers that we speak about frequently. And so I think we have to push pause on what the PP is attempting to do here and point out that there were areas of progress.
Ms. Garnett, you had one other thing you wanted to.
Yeah, sorry.
1 second.
And there you go.
All right, you can go ahead, Mr. Harris.
From a leader, I saw a response from you that Minister Colin Crowell had said that the government never claimed that the road at Mocha Arcadia was in the squatters and Mocha Arcadia were never in the part of the road. Subsequent to a column I did, Kwame McCarthy said the exact opposite. Monday night, Anna Nadlal repeated what Kwame said, that the squatters were in the part of the road. However, he denied that people have been allocated those lands to the side of the road, and he said that will never happen. He accused people like me and you of promoting a racist line. My question is, have there been constructions along that section of road where the Mocha Arcadia people live? Because you asked,
we provided a video. We didn't just talk. We said and showed in the video that you move the people from here straight along this path. We pointed out that the first claim you made, and Colin Crowell made that claim when the issue occurred. The claim was that they were in the part of the road. The road is completed, and we point out that they are not in the part of the road. And then I further proceeded to point out that right opposite where they are claiming that people were in the part of the road, right opposite, much closer to the road, they are giving out lands. I never said that they give out the lands that the people in Mocha were on. What I was establishing was, how do you say you need this as a buffer zone? And that on this side of Mocha, where you move them, right opposite now, you turn and you give people land. And I pointed out a big concrete fence is placed there. We show it in the video. So they can, I don't worry with Kwame. Kwame has to do what he's doing. But the facts will show that they put people in the same part with those lands, having claimed in the first instance they were in the part, and secondly that they needed a buffer zone. The buffer zone that they are talking about outside from that part in Mocha, coming right down, they have given out all of those lands. And so those people are closer to the road than the people of Mocha were. In fact, in the case of the people of Mocha, there was a trench or a drain, call it whatever you want, between the land and the road. The lands that they give out now, there are no trenches. They are extremely close to the road with no drain to separate them. And that is the point that is being made. And Colin Kroll, Anil Nandlal, or Kwame cannot change the facts. Those are the facts. I sense they will now find some reason why suddenly it's 20 feet from the center of the road rather than 40 feet. I'm waiting for the explanation to that.
Thank you. I'll take one last question if there is any other.
I have two questions if you don't mind. I'll say both of them now. The first one, Mr. Martin made an interesting point where he said previously in opposition, Dr. Jaglio had said 50% for the teachers, but now you're in government, it's something different. Mr. Norton earlier mentioned that he's promising 35%. What guarantee or assurance the teachers have been to trust anything that someone says in opposition if you can say when you get into government, the situation on the there or the reality is different and you have to work with what the reality is instead of holding to whatever you promised. So why should teachers now
They should
listen to Mr. Norton?
They should listen. They should listen because we are saying, one, there are the resources at present. Two, that even if you don't even have to make any big changes except cut the waste and the corruption, and easily you will get more than $50 billion from the infrastructure budget that you can use to pay workers. The other reason why they should believe us is without oil, we improve workers' salaries by more than 70%. And if we did that without oil resources, why is it we can't do it with oil resources? So there are a lot of reasons why they should believe us. And there should be no comparison with us and Barra Jagdeo. Barra Jagdeo is a hypocrite and a pathological liar. Here is a man who said at the end of the last elections, we must get biometrics, we must get a clean voters list. And the minute he was in government, that went. Virtually everything he said, when we were in opposition the last time, we promised people that we will improve the Guyana police force and improve their security. We did that. We promised people that they will get quality water. We did that. It is now you are giving people Morbi again, the PPP. They should believe us because we promised them we will improve electricity. And when we went into government, we improved electricity to the point where blackouts were becoming a thing of the past. You promised recently, meaning the government, to improve electricity. You told us when this boat comes, you're going to end, blackout going to be reduced considerably. Well, the boat is here and they're endless blackout. I'm saying to you, we have a more credible record than the People's Progressive Party in opposition and in government. The PPP has arrived at the point that it doesn't know when it is lying. It becomes normal. And so there should be no comparison between the two. We were promised that the fiber optic cable can solve the internet problems. Till now it cannot. We were promised that Skeldon Sugar Factory will generate so much electricity, there'd be no blackouts in Berbice, and it would contribute to the national grid. Berbice being in blackout then, we improve it by adding capacity. The government came and it gone back to the same place. So there is no scope for comparison between us and Barrett Jagdeo and Air Finale. We have stood to our word over the years. Like I've shown you in security, shown you in electricity, I showed you in water, I showed you in terms of wage increases, in a way which Jagdeo does not know. The man is distant from truth. If he sees truth, he would run. That's all I would say.
One thing we also want to make sure that we clarify here. I noticed you mentioned Dr. Barrett Jagdeo. Barrett Jagdeo is not supposed to refer to in that way. And given that he's making statements like everybody knows, and that's how he decides economic policy, that raises some serious questions about.
Well, look, I wouldn't go there. Forbes Burnham was given an honorary doctorate. And throughout the history, I've never heard anybody call. But you see, when you got for Adan.
Ms. Garnet?
Okay, and during this situation with the Mocha Arcadia persons that were there, that were removed, the opposition had noted that they were prepared to assist the residents with legal action. Can you say if that ever materialized, if it's ongoing? And can you say if the opposition keeps up with the residents and say if where they are now and what's going on?
You're trying to get some information which I can give you in terms of where they are. But I will say this to you. You know that the legal matter was filed and that it is being pursued. If you don't know, well, I'll invite you to research.
Thank you. All right. There being no other questions, I would like to thank our media personnel for joining today's program. And of course, our viewing audience on all our social media platforms. Do have a wonderful weekend.